This is a very special episode, and I'm super jazzed about it for two reasons. Number one, I get to talk to one of my favorite people in the world. It's my practicum supervisor, a guy. You know when they told you in elementary school, or in middle school and high school, if you just worked harder, you could be as fast as that guy, or you could lift weights like that guy, be as strong as him. It's just because you're not working hard. And then when you're about a junior or senior in high school, you realize that guy just jumps higher than me. Like, I could lift all day. He's just faster. I work really, really hard, and that guy's just Stephen Curry. He just makes baskets better than me, right? Well, I didn't realize until I was way too far down the road that also works academics for brain computational power. I just always, told myself the story, if you just studied more or read more, that you would be smart like these other people. And then I worked with Dr. Michael Gomez, that we're going to talk to today, he's my practicum supervisor, and I realized, his brain just works 10x mine. He's just smarter than me. I could study all day and read everything. Nope. He's just faster and better than me at this. So it's one of my great honors. So here's why I'm calling him today. This is exciting. So one of my meta goals for this show, right? One of the regular goals is to give people practical information they can take home and use to solve some of personal challenges that they're experiencing. One of my meta goals is to show people what it looks like to live a healthier, well life. And so what I want to do is pull back the curtain whenever I can on challenging issues, on regular issues, on just normal everyday life for things that most people don't get to see. And so we got a call for today's show from an extraordinary woman in Texas who experienced some really outside of the box trauma, and she also has a child with very particular special needs. And so Dr. Gomez is a friend of mine, and he's a mentor of mine, and he also is a expert child psychologist in trauma and in autism. And it just so happens that this particular call is about how to talk to a young person with autism about family trauma. And if you don't have a young person with autism in your life, this show will still be really important for you. But I knew, I need to get some deeper insight into this. Any good counselor does this. Any good therapist does this. Any good doctor does this. Any good academic does this. When they're faced with something that they want to get some more information or some more depth on, they don't go to the internet and read headlines. They call an expert and they ask hard questions. They do this about plumbing too, by the way, and how to raise chickens and how to fix your tire on your car, whatever, right? So I wanted to give you good folks a ringside seat to a conversation between two professionals talking about the particulars here. And so we reached out to Dr. Gomez and I said, hey man, would you mind being on the show and talking me through this and helping me think through this particular question? He said, absolutely, I'm in. And so I'm going to go straight to Dr. Michael Gomez on the phone. Hola, muchacho. How are you doing?
Hey, Dr. Delony. Can you hear me okay over there?
Yeah, I can hear you great, man. You can just call me John. I'm back to being one of your students again, so it's good for me.
Okay, well, you earned the doctor. Also, that was maybe the best compliment I've ever been given at any point in time, so thank you for that.
You're welcome, man. How are you?
Doing well. Good to hear from you. Good to talk to you.
Hey, so before we go any further, you just got some big, fancy new gig. Tell me about this.
Yes, I with the Profession UC list is one that will be starting in October. I do a lot of work, as you say, with trauma and autism. I was lucky enough to get offered a spot at Emma Pendleton Bradley Hospital, part of the Lifespan Institute in Providence, Rhode Island, which is one of Brown University's teaching hospitals. So wonderful place, amazing team, stellar nationally and internationally, and just wonderful people working there and wonderful kids.
So if you're a listener, this is how two roads diverge in a wood. Yoda gets a job at a Brown teaching hospital, which is one of the most extraordinary academic institutions on the planet. The other guy gets a YouTube show. That's how our paths converge, Dr. Gomez, are separated, went our separate ways. So way to go, man. All right, hey, I appreciate you being willing to talk me through this situation. All right, so here's the story. A couple is married, and then they get divorced. And my understanding, and I haven't talked to this woman yet, so I'm just going through an email that was sent. They get divorced. The guy was not a good husband, but a really excellent father. He gets has a relationship with somebody else, and mom and her autistic son go their separate ways. Dad is still super involved in his autistic son's life. He's a great father. They have become friends again, good co-parents. And then rather suddenly he, for reasons unknown to really anybody, he murders his new girlfriend, their kid, and then he commits suicide. It's all over the news. It's a big thing in the city with which they live. Mom has to tell autistic child this news and grieve herself. And she did a great job out of the gate talking to her son, saying, "Hey, your dad has passed away. Man, what is the right next step on talking about how he passed away? It's going to be on the news. His friends are going to ask him about it. And by the way, this child who was murdered in this situation was close friends with him." Right. So now he's got this extra thing. His dad took his own life, and dad also murdered one of his friends. And he's a highly functioning autistic young man. So, man, walk me through how we would navigate that conversation, both as a 13-year-old and then as the kid grows up.
Absolutely. So a couple of recommendations for both providers, whether it's a therapist, nurse, doctor, talking to the parent, and for the parent, for mom in this scenario. First, I always advise providers, like if you're a counselor talking to a parent, they're going to want you to tell the kid this. And we have to very gently tell them, we will show you how to tell the kid, and we'll walk you through that, but we're not going to do it ourselves. We'll be in the room if you need us to. We'll be on the phone or on the Zoom camera. And a lot of parents, rightly so, get upset. They're like, well, then what am I paying you for? Which is a legitimate question. And so the reason for that is not because we're trying to avoid it as providers, but we're not going to be there when the kid has a nightmare at 2 a.m. We're not going to be there when you're just having Sunday lunch and you ask the kid if he wants ketchup and he says, "Why did daddy shoot?" That's kind of the rhythm. It'll happen. And, we want someone that the thing we want to emphasize to parents, the first thing is you are the best person to talk to them. So
the meta there is the parents got to have this conversation, got to walk through what happened. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
And now they can seek, just like you said earlier, seek support, seek expertise, practice with a professional, practice with a friend, and we encourage them to do that. Okay. However, we don't want to kind of give outsource the conversation, basically.
There you go. All right. So what is mom has already done? Man, she did it great. She got beneath eye level. She with her autistic son. She communicated dad has passed away. They grieved that together. It was really remarkable. And now, what's the follow-up conversation to say, hey, here's actually what all went down?
Yeah, I want to also highlight what you just said, which is that in and of itself is a huge victory and strength for mom. Yeah. Because, like you said, she is in her own grieving process and her own confusion and sadness and anger and fear. And she's putting that, it's like, I'm in this pain, but I have to worry about my little boy here. Yeah. And so that in itself, we want to kind of touch base on, especially as providers, saying, hey, you have that conversation. Yep. The other ones you'll be able to have too. If you got through that one, you're going to get through the other ones. Okay. And repetitively kind of let mom know that. Okay. That first one is usually the harder one, even if it may not be the most difficult one, which I think applies in this case where your daddy passed away and that was hard in and of itself. Now she has to explain some more of the details for him. But emphasizing that you've already done it. You already kind of ripped some of the Band-Aid off. So you can do this again. Okay. We're just going to give you some extra tools. Excellent. Okay. So walk us through the hard stuff here. Sure. So a couple of rules that I give caregivers is first, less is more. Okay. So, and I talk about micro conversations. So we don't this. We also do a similar move when we talk about sex and sexuality with kids. Mm-hmm. We're not a fan of the talk, like the 2-hour talk that traumatized most of us. I'm from Texas. That's right. I got the talk. I still have nightmares. So we want, like, when they're little, like, here's the name of your private parts. Right. Okay, they're growing up. Why does she have different private parts? Well, and those are very short conversations. So a lot of parents will want to kind of just blah, and rightly so, but we want them to give them information and then check. And so a lot of times when I'm coaching parents to how to do this, so I want to tell you, Billy, exactly how your father died. Okay. Okay. I told you he passed away. And I also advise parents to give kids as many options as they can within these conversations. So the next question would be, do you want to know how he died?
Okay.
And nope. Okay. And then she can ask later, maybe like not necessarily that day, but next week or a couple of months. Now, the only time I kind of shorten the options is kind of this scenario where he's going to see it. So with that particular question, I would say your daddy passed away in a way that's on the news, and you might see it or might read about it. So I really want to tell you what happened. But even then, you can give options. Would you like to talk now? Would you like to talk on the weekend? Would you like to talk tonight? And like, we're going to do it. It's just how you get to decide how.
And it's almost conscious discipline. Like I'm going to give you a set of options and you get to choose. And, but that's letting a child in a moment that's going to feel really powerless. It's allowing that child to retain some shred of autonomy, right? Like like I'm holding on to, I can control some of this, right?
Yes.
Okay.
There's I don't know if you're familiar with the comedian Patton Oswalt. His wife wrote about the Golden State Killer, and she passed away. She died pretty suddenly. And he was telling an anecdote about, and as a psychologist, I thought the teacher who gave him this advice was brilliant, because this is what we would give advice to for a family, which is, she said, don't tell her in the dark. Give her a choice. And so he took her to a park. They had a wonderful morning. And then at lunchtime, he basically told her what happened. And he told her but that was, unlike this mom, that was their first conversation about that. She had passed away the day before, overnight. The kid was at, like, I guess, an in-laws or something, but giving her options about what she wanted to hear, where she wanted to hear it, how much she wanted to hear. And one thing I do, especially with kids who have trauma, who have any kind of, who are not neurotypical, is I use a 1 to 10 scale. And if they have trouble with numbers, we do like little, middle, big. But I usually say, we're going to have a tough conversation, Billy. So I want to make sure that if it's uncomfortable, that I know that. But if it's painful, like you feel like something's snapping, I know that.
Okay.
So it's a 1 to 10 scale. 1 means you're totally calm, fine. 5 is, it's a little tough, but I'm okay. And 10 is, I'm going to break down. I'm going to start crying or yelling or shut down. And so can we agree that if you get to 7 or 8, that you let me know, and that we'll take a break, and then we'll finish up at a different time.
Awesome.
So take your time. And you hear me tell that parents because when I work in like an ER or an ICU, and the mom has to tell them, hey, kid died, your brother died. I'll say, take your time, slow it down. You have time. Right. Even if they may not objectively have that time. In the moment, I want them to go slower, not faster.
Gotcha. And so in the past, you and I have talked extensively. So we're leading up to the moment when it will say, your daddy died by suicide. It's as clear as it can be, and simple and direct. Am I on the right track there?
Yes, and I always check, not just with kids with who have trauma, but also kids with FAS, autism, intellectual disability, our current name for what used to be called mental retardation. Have you heard that word before? Yeah. Suicide, Billy?
What does that mean?
What does it mean? What do you think? And some of the responses are interesting. So I had a family where the kid's like, oh, no, it means they killed themselves. And it was like an 8-year-old, like, wow, that's pretty out where you learned that. And said, anything else it means. It's a very important follow-up. Oh, it means my dad's in hell. Wait a second.
Okay.
Let's, and which also signals to me as a psychologist, and now I need to get the chaplain in here.
Gotcha.
This is kind of a little bit above my pay grade.
Now it's it's gone theological on us. Okay.
Yes.
And what about the follow-up, which would that be a moment to put a period at the end of that sentence, and then to circle back and say, when somebody we wouldn't want somebody to wait until somebody at school pops up and says, hey, your dad killed so-and-so, your friend. You'd want to have that at the same time, or would you want to have some space between those conversations?
It kind of depends on the kid and the scenario. For this scenario, it sounds like there's an imminence, and so the conversations will have to probably occur kind of with shorter gaps.
Okay. But a gap is good?
A gap is good, and a gap can be like 10 minutes to basically have the kid down regulate. Yep. So you're at a 9.
Yep.
Let's take a second. Let's go play with our dog, and come back in, and we'll talk a little bit more later.
Okay. And give me the verbiage you would pass along to let somebody know that their dad took the life of their friend.
And for parents, I say, what language do you think they would understand? Let's workshop that.
Okay.
And I would have them generate it. Because especially with kids now, with kind of neurotypical kids who have trauma, I can usually give them language. And the language is based on development. And the very short version of this, which I know you understand this, but just for the audience, I distinguish kind of between 3 levels of the child development within kids, like, young kids to 18. First one for your kind of toddlers, maybe first graders, second graders, is egocentric, which means the definition is A plus B equals me. And
I know a lot of politicians that still have that.
I was going to say it's 5-year-olds and some 40-year-old men, but that's not the point, John. So the next stage up is kind of your mid to late elementary into junior high, which is concrete. A plus B equals C. Mm-hmm. And one activity one of my mentors taught me was, right now, look around your physical area. Just look around really briefly, and audience, do this too. And if you don't see it, it is not a causal factor. And so a good example is like a 4th grader, 2 girls are laughing, and the kid thinks that, oh, they're laughing at me. Well, the kid may be living in a very violent household with a lot of arguing. And so he's not connecting it. For him, a causal thing is they're laughing at me, so it must be they're mad at me. So he's not making the connection from home to school, but he sees the 2 girls laughing at the joke they told each other. So it has to be the reason for his distress.
Gotcha.
And then the last one is A plus B equals Y, abstract reasoning. And this is where it can actually get kind of theological. And then this is where I would tell a parent, if they do have a faith-based community, to let's talk to that person.
Okay. If
they don't, they can just have the conversation however they feel comfortable. But again, to practice that, and a really good rule of thumb, and when I'm prepping parents, I'll say, I'll do a question that's kind of mean, like, let's say, did you hate my dad? And they're like, why would he ask that? Like, well, what would you say? And they stumble, which is correct. I say, you can say, I want to think about how to answer that.
Yep.
And can we talk about it later? Can mom get some time, because mom also is entitled to her time just like her son is.
There you go. Yeah, I need to take some space. Mom's got boundaries too, right?
Yes. And so to go back to your question, so for an egocentric, like a kid, and if you're like for kids who are not neurotypical, if you're confused, like are they concrete or egos, I'm not sure, go to the one below.
Right.
So egocentric, so go to the lower denominator. And so for an egocentric kid, would say, for example, your dad shot. It'd be as concrete as possible. If they know, or your dad took a life, maybe too abstract.
Okay.
Your dad hurt them very badly. He killed them. Mm-hmm. Then he killed himself, and it had nothing to do with you.
And then you just got to own that space and that weight and that silence.
Yep.
Right.
Yep, and just silence is probably the hardest part of these conversations. Not what you say, but when you take a break.
Right.
For a concrete kid, it would sound very similar, but I would say probably the last statement said, I would say it had nothing to do with you. Do you feel safe right now?
Yeah. In
this room, in our house? Do you feel safe at school? Like those really super concrete things that kids might be worried about. Like, well, is he going to hurt? Like, someone going to hurt us now?
Right.
And for abstract kids, what do you think this will have? Like, are you worried about kids at high school bringing this up for you, buddy?
Yeah.
If so, what kind of plan can we generate to make sure you feel like you're safe over there? And you can kind of go, basically your zip code can enlarge depending on the developmental stage.
Awesome.
But I still kind of work off of that.
I love it.
It's not your fault. Concrete and then abstract. And again, you can tell the kid, we can check in tonight or tomorrow morning. If you have questions, just let mom know.
So one last question here. We'll keep it real quick. Is one of the most common tools I give folks in this situation is to write a letter to the person who died by suicide, write a letter to the person who died in a car wreck. And it's okay to be angry. It's okay to be frustrated. But what I want to gently do is to steer them towards, often when we experience, our loved ones die in a traumatic way, we get frozen on their current pain that they are currently still hurting. And there's something about writing a letter to them, letting our feelings be heard, and moving them past, they're not experiencing that pain anymore, right?
Yes.
That lets us go, whew. My question for you is, does a 13-year-old with autism, I've had that backfire on me when working with clients with special needs. Does that work with a kid with autism?
So the short answer is it does. It just works kind of differently.
Okay.
And so one of the things, there's some, again, wonderful resources out there. And I think that's a great first step for a family. If they run into trouble, or even if they don't, I usually advise them, like, seek a therapist. The model that's probably the most evidence-based is trauma-focused CBT for traumatic grief. They can, and it's actually trauma-focused CBT has data for kids with autism and trauma.
Excellent. Good. Okay.
Yeah, and I think it actually is available in both in Texas and also in your area of the U.S.
Cool.
But when we're doing that, I would also ask the parent, how the way your son processes information, do you think this would work? Do you think a picture would be better? Do you think he has to do something physical?
There you go. Yeah.
How does he, not just with this, but how does he process stressful information, like he failed a test, or somebody like is bullying him, something that's not obviously equivalent, but something that will trigger a stress response? How does he best process that?
And we're going to mirror that stress response in this situation too, and I'm going to make it available to him. Awesome.
So it's like, well, he likes writing stories. Like, so one kid loved writing stories about Marvel superheroes. He'd fill up journals of them. That was how he coped with stressors.
Yep.
And so when he was in foster care, that was kind of our go-to for him when, like, if something like, well, the placement didn't work out, or court got extended, or you got to go testify, we'd say, hey, do you need to write, buddy? And so that would be his thing.
Awesome.
I had another kid, hated writing. He wanted to do something more physical, more sensory. And so, like, okay, let's get you in our motor room. We'll have you bounce around there for a bit. We'll have a conversation.
I like it how you call it a motor room. That's where, like, my wife wishes I had a motor room. Awesome.
They're great. Yeah. And so mom knows her kid, and that's what we keep telling them is, your kid better than anyone on the planet.
Love it.
And so how does he usually process stressful information?
Awesome. Well, hey, dude, I got to run. Sure. You are an absolute saint. And so I'm grateful for you for giving up your time. And at your hourly rate, that was probably about $11,000 just now. So grateful for you.
I wish.
And you'll come see me in Nashville here soon, and I look forward to hanging out. But, dude, I'm grateful for you, Dr. Gomez. Thank you so much, man.